We'd like to call to order the Board of School Commissioners meeting this evening and invite all that care to join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so next up is the roll call. All commissioners are in attendance, but our two student representatives, Solomano and Champagne, cannot be with us this evening. And so next on the agenda would be an approval of the agenda.
I would like to actually modify the agenda. I'd like to add under old business, the mascot moniker. We did not discuss it last time, so I would like to add it for tonight to get further clarification.
The administration does not have a mascot to come back before us. They're not ready yet. So
Okay.
that's why it was removed.
So I would like to know, though, where we're at in the process, so if we could discuss it as a group.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So I think we are 5-5. I guess we're going to have to do a roll call. So.
I'm going to abstain. Does that change things?
Do you have a reason for abstention?
Yeah, I don't really care either way. I think it'd be worthwhile to have a discussion.
Can I say something before we vote?
On the agenda?
Yeah. I would like to go with, do the vote as well, because if we base on precedent of how every vote has been in the last 2.5 years, it is out to the public that Rutland does have a name, and it was put out by Principal Schillinger, and
Okay, that's for discussion. Right now, we're talking about whether we're adding it.
if we're going on precedent, then we need to have a conversation about it and vote about it.
We're voting on whether or not it's going to be added to the agenda. So, roll call?
Yes. Sarah?
What am I doing?
Nay, I think you'd say nay.
Yes. Sorry.
I'm so glad you're telling her how to vote, Mary Beth.
No, I meant Stephanie. She didn't know. Oh my God, forget it.
No, you just told her how to vote.
Karen?
Yes.
Courtney?
Just need to end.
Yes is to add and no is to not?
Correct.
No.
That's how you were asking, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter?
Yes.
Kevin?
Abstain.
Mary Beth?
Nay.
Tricia?
Yes.
Charlene?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
And me, I'm a no. So we have 4 noes and 5 yeses and 1 abstention.
Added under unfinished business. Mascot update. Okay, so I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda with the, oh, I didn't mention the addition in the consent agenda. There is a personnel addendum as well at everyone's desk. And then the addition of mascot update on unfinished business.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. So I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda that includes the minutes from the previous meetings, personnel memo, and the aforementioned addendum.
So moved.
Second.
Second? Okay. And since it's consent agenda, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. So next up, we have public input. Is there any members of the public out there to address the board? No, we didn't have anyone sign up, right? No. Do we have a sheet? Okay, all right, excellent. So student rep reports, our 2 student reps are absent, so I think we have a student fill-in here.
Feel so young. I'll try to, I think I have some information from some of the schools, so I'll read what they were going to say, and I'll start with, the high school hosted an assembly this last week with John Broderick, Judge Broderick is a retired New Hampshire Supreme Court Justice who speaks throughout New England on the importance of good mental health. So he's come to the high school before. He's a really good speaker, and that was a good event. This is a big one. Congratulations to Lauren Salamano, who is named as one of 2 representatives from Vermont as the winner of the United States Senate Youth Program Scholarship. Really hard to It's really prestigious. Annually, 2 students from every state are selected for a $10,000 scholarship and an all-expenses-paid week-long trip to Washington, D.C. While at the Capitol, students learn about the inner workings of the federal government. They meet with members of Congress, the Supreme Court, and the presidential administration. So it's a great honor for Lauren and for the school. From the middle school, this week is Spirit Week at RMS. Today the theme was anything but a backpack. We brought our students' creativity. Check out the Facebook pages for pictures. Middle school is gearing up for Lifetime Sports. It's a 6-week program where they spend 3 hours on Thursday morning learning and practicing a lifetime sport. They're partnering with many awesome local businesses such as Mindful Monkey, Vermont Martial Arts, the Gymnasium, Vermont Sports and Fitness, Mountaintop Resort in Pico Mountain. And Mrs. Bennett and Mr. Bloomer have been instrumental in making this happen. So thank you to them. And the middle school is well into the second trimester, so families should be receiving report cards shortly. We encourage all families to check jump rope for their child's progress in classroom standards throughout the year. That's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you. So next up, it's going back to you, Bill, with the central office reports and the superintendent report.
Now I feel a lot older. You have at your desks or your seat the high school program of studies. This is just the final product. Bianca and Greg had talked about it earlier, and Bianca brought this to you just to take a look at. If you're interested, you can keep it. You can return it. You can return it later if you want. If you return it, we'll use it back at the high school. So just for your purview. I think you might have seen in the consent agenda that we have 2 principals retiring this year, 2 administrators. And I want to acknowledge that and thank them and recognize them very briefly. I want to recognize Suzanne Ingalls, principal at Northeast, and Patty Beaumont, principal at Rutland Middle School. Hopefully you're back there somewhere. I see Patty. Yep.
I see Suzanne.
I see you now. So great leaders. They've really changed their schools and made them better places. And so we want to thank them. Talk more about them later on in the year as the year comes to the end, because they're not retiring until the end of 2023 school year. But we wanted to let the board know that we're starting a process for replacing those big shoes. And we will have 2 screening committees. One will be led by Rob Bliss. He'll work on the Rutland Middle School process. And the other will be led by Pam Reed. She'll work on the Northeast process. So if you are interested, we would love to have 1 or 2 board members participate in either one of those committees. It's a great opportunity to learn about who's out there and how the process works. And if you feel inclined, please let Allison know, and we'll set that up for you. Okay. I wanted to acknowledge, and I don't think he's here, send commendations to Bill Lucci. Bill Lucci is Stafford Tech's director at the Adult Education Program. He was recognized, I think last week, by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. The Commission of Public Schools, that subsection, recognized Bill for the 2022 Outstanding Service Award. That award recognizes individuals in the commission who have gone above and beyond the call of duty with their significant contributions to both the schools they have visited and the organization as a whole. So it's a great recognition. NEASC is our accreditation body for all 6 New England states, so it's a pretty big acknowledgement from a big organization, a real honor for Bill. An update on accreditation for Rutland High School. Speaking of NEASC, Rutland High School received its 2-year accreditation letter just the beginning of this month. That letter reports on where the school is at with accreditation. So yes, we're continuing with continuing to be accredited. And in that letter, they also send commendations for the work that the high school does for the last 2 years since our last NEAS visit. They specifically noted work on the curriculum the high school is doing, facilities improvements, social emotional learning work that's happening in our advisories, and also how we're communicating the curriculum to the public. So that's all good work. The next step in the process then is the 5-year check-in, and that will happen in 2024. Our dates have been shifted a little bit because of COVID, so we're a little bit off. But in 2024, NEAS will be interested in hearing more about the social emotional learning work that's being done at the high school, and they also are interested in how our work with Portrait of a Graduate is going to fit in with the district's strategic plan and how the high school fits into that. So that all will be part of what we talk about in 2024. You know, as a board, that you hear about a lot of the service work that our Rutland City kids do throughout the community. Happens all throughout the year, and especially this time of year, there's a lot of that goes on. And I just wanted to recognize one group in particular that's asking for our help. This year, our Grove Street campus is doing a community service project, and they're doing a food drive. So they are looking for donated canned goods, non-perishable food items, and they're trying to collect that by the end of this week, December 16th. So if you're interested, we have a box out in the kitchen there that we're trying to collect all this stuff. We're going to give it to the Grove Street folks, and then they're going to distribute it to people who need it in the community. So it's another good thing our kids do. And then finally, I wanted to update the board about the Portrait of the Graduate work that we've been doing. We've had our second meeting last month. We had, I think, 76 community members there, and I wanted to thank all of you for participating and all the folks in the community who were able to come and help us with this. All these great brains have made it a really interesting process. So in November, we were considering the competencies that students need to master and how that aligns with our vision for our students. We tried to think about what those competencies mean and flesh that out a little bit. And so the next meeting, which is this week, we're going to be committing to a core group of competencies that we say, these are the things that we really think we need to focus on as a school district, and that fits with what our vision is. I'll give you, for instance, our 76 folks try to select through a process what they thought were the most important competencies that we should be focusing on. And number one came out to be communication. So we will be looking at what does communication mean and how does that what does that look like in a school? Written communication, oral communication, etc. So that's happening on Thursday at 4 p.m. as a reminder for you, and we hope you all can attend to that. And I think that's it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Superintendent Olson. So next on our agenda is the Rutland Schools Foundation update, and I see we have Mary and Collin in the audience, and I don't know if Ted, you're leading it off, or okay. So we had asked through the Finance Committee for an update and on the foundation, and Mary and Collin are here to give us that information. So welcome back. You both sat here many hours, I believe.
Collin's in charge.
Okay.
I was told we had 60 to 75 minutes, so buckle up. We're here today to talk about raising money and postgraduate awards. As you guys may or may not know, at the end of the high school year, there's various awards and scholarships given out, and some of them in the names of the class of 1959 or Mary Moran. And prior to 2014, these donations would come into the school system, and we'd have various sundry checking account sitting there for them. So in CFO at the time, Peter Amon's beautiful brainchild of an idea was to create a separate foundation away from the school system, and he did all the legwork, all the hard work. So in August 15th, 2014, we combined all of the various sub-checking accounts and created a nonprofit public benefit corporation, 501c3, separate from the public school system, where we could house these funds and invest them and create an endowment, and that obviously then driven by the donating classes and dole out these scholarships to help the money grow. and build towards the future. So really, all the credit goes to Peter Amons. He did all the work. We created a foundation committee of, at the time, Joe Kraus, myself, and Candy Grant, as well as the CFO. And now we've expanded the foundation to include other board members, Mary Moran, who's both a grantor and a board member, as well as Matt Getty, another local graduate. And the goal of the foundation is to kind of expand upon what classes were doing on their own and have a conduit where people could give charitably back how they see fit to the school system, not through the budget, as well as have a 501c3 designation where their contributions are tax deductible, as well as the extra legwork to have qualified RMDs be allowed to be accepted by our foundation. As it states right now, we have about 20 different donors that channel funds in, as you'll see, variously giving awards out to postgrads. That's the way the foundation exists today. So it's all the money we have being invested for the future is going towards these awards towards the end of the year. We're all volunteers, so there's not probably a better chassis out there for an endowment where we're using Vanguard, stripped down, no expense fees, and there's no one getting paid inside the organization. So it's a great way to give back, and it's a great way to help support the alumni, kind of coexist with the Rutland Public School Board. We never came to you guys with any reports, so we decided it was a good time to let you guys know we're here, as well as let the community graduates know that it's a great conduit and a way to give back charitably towards the future. Mary is one of our best donors, and she's got her own first generation college student awards she gives out every year. That's a 4-year award, so she gives very charitably. So we're here to answer questions. First and foremost, let you guys know it exists, let the community know it exists, but also answer any questions, see how we can be of service. We'll have a more robust annualized report coming to you guys every January per charter. We've kind of been working out the kinks on the odds and ends, but I'll pause there. And I think we may or may not have passed out this little summary, but there'll be a more detailed report every January that talks about the year in full, students, non-names redacted as who's getting awards, what's been done. But pause and questions.
You somewhat answered the question, so I was wondering if the report was going to be where we were at financially in there, but also the recipients and maybe the criteria that made them eligible might be kind of nice to kind of keep it first and foremost, and have the categories. As a board member, I would love to know what is out there and who's receiving.
Sure. We handle mostly the finances and the taking and goings of the money. We don't delve into the lack of word merit of the scholarships. That goes to the individual doning class. So let's say in 1957, they choose their own recipient. We just dole out the funds. We harbor the funds for them, invest them, and then when it comes time for them to dole out the appropriate scholarship, we transfer the funds to them. So we don't actively decide who's getting what, and we don't. So Mary's got her own criteria. It was hers. It's not the foundation's position to.
And it goes through the process at the high school.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you.
But certainly, I think each one of those it's probably something Bill could give out to the board as far as each one of those scholarships, what merits they're looking for, and the application process.
So, the guidance department handles that, and they'll have a list of awards and who they are geared for, and there's a process every year with guidance making a selection.
It does. Thank you.
So we have and thank you for doing this. Both of you, this is just tremendous, helping our students succeed. We have the donations and the total amount of awards allotted in 19 through 22. How many students received awards each year? About?
Probably, I would say 15 to 20, Ted, is that right?
Last year was 14, typically 15 to 20.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the 15-ish plus or minus.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? No? Great.
Just one other question. So these awards would be given out at the award ceremony at the before graduation?
Correct.
Yes.
Is there anything that's done Like maybe somebody who's graduated and their circumstances change in their second or third year of college, are they eligible or no to come back and ask, or no?
It's not been done, and that would be a Bill question.
Okay.
Ed's got his hand up too. Ed?
I was going to add, though, that there are a couple of scholarships that are given out on a 4-year basis. Not all of them are done that way. Most of them are just a one-time, 1-year grant. However, there is a tranche of scholarships that say, we know you're hopefully going to school for 4 more years, so you're going to get 4 consecutive awards each year that you stay in school and prove that you have a certain GPA. And
So that was going to be my next question. So if someone is not actively participating in college,
Right.
but we have them enrolled,
If you don't provide the high school and
Right.
the coordinators with the transcript to show that you completed the courses with satisfactory academic results, then you might not qualify for the next tranche.
Yeah, just to add to that, so Karen, that's a good suggestion. If there was a person who wanted to make that a scholarship or an organization or like a class of whatever year, that could be an interesting scholarship to give. But the foundation really is just handling the investment of the money and you know, making sure it's safe. It's the scholarship donors that are setting up the criteria in the high school guidance department. It's just you know, going through a process to help select. Does that make sense?
are the people in Stafford, the technical programs, are they eligible for that or no?
For if it was a high school student,
Right.
Rutland high school student.
That's
right.
going on to, say, Vermont Technical
Yeah,
College.
yeah,
Okay.
It has to be a Rutland student.
Right.
When did this start again? How long has this been going on?
2014?
2014, but the scholarships go back further than that, but it was more of the class had an account and they donate money, and again, through Peter Amons' idea, we've created truly an endowment that we've exceeded the rates of return of a bank, if you will. So it's a way to help endow your scholarship and make sure it goes on to the future. Even when some of the active donating dries up, our goal is to help that money last as long as we can and help as many students as we can.
Kevin?
So the foundation came up in a discussion at a policy committee meeting recently. Cut me off if this is a bad question.
No such thing.
Okay.
From what I heard from teachers
All right.
growing up.
So, in policy, there was discussion about that the foundation was set up as an organization to receive gifts, because the school district can't technically do that. And then the question came up is, if somebody wanted to donate money for something other than scholarships, could that go through the foundation? The example was to pay for renewing the turf field. Is that?
That is inside the legal documents that it's possible. As we're set up right now, again, it's kind of donor driven, where the funds we have been given for certain purposes, not unrestricted. But certainly we could be a conduit for a group or a class that wants to raise money for not just scholarships. There's certain things, and I'm not a legalese, that we can't do, but that's more of the cross between the public education budget funding. So as long as it's not one of those things, like we can't, buy books and stuff like that, from my knowledge. But certainly if there's a group of donors that wanted to use us as a chassis, we're there for that.
Okay.
Absolutely. And it's again, under the it's a 501c3, so it's a charitable way to do it and have your donors get deductions. But we don't have any unrestricted funds at the moment.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Oh, okay. Excellent. So thank you both very much for all your work on this and keeping us updated. And just if there's anyone out there that wants to donate to the schools or the foundation, is the avenue to go through guidance if they want to set something up, or reach out directly to the foundation if they simply want to donate?
I'd start with the business office and/or through
Okay.
Bill, or go through the business
Excellent.
office. We'd be happy to have more people come in and share more in-depth information on why it'd be beneficial instead of doing it on your own. Again, we're kind of building out the marketing piece to show, A, how the funds perform, which is very well, but to give that to people to say, why would you use the foundation? It's obviously first and foremost to help the cause you're going to, but we have a low-cost, high-performing model to help your money do well.
Great.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Thank you
so
for
much.
having us.
Oh, Ted.
I'd like to add one thing
Yeah.
further to Colin's key point, where Collin pointed out this is a very effective conduit. One thing that the foundation worked out in the past year was an arrangement whereby if donors wish to donate appreciated securities to the foundation, then they can get a very significant tax benefit, depending upon their own tax situation, where the donor is able to deduct the market value of the securities donated to the foundation, as opposed to the cost basis. So Peter Amons continued his involvement in spite of his retirement in the past year, and worked out those particulars, which are, again, depending on your situation, can be very tax advantageous. That's a plug.
Too, you can also donate from your RMD. If you have an RMD and you don't need all that cash, send it straight to your charity foundation, and that'll help you out too.
Absolutely.
Hey, good.
Right, tack on to that.
Tax advice.
Free tax advice. You never know what you're going to get at a board meeting.
Excellent. Well, thank you both very much.
Thank you very much.
For coming back to this room and for your continued work.
Yes.
I hope you don't mind if we don't stay.
Yes.
Not even for old time's sake? Okay, so next up we have the budget. So we'll turn it over to Ted.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. I'd like to give the school board an overview of where we are on our budget planning thus far, and provide each board member with an opportunity to offer guidance and ask us questions. Of course, you can always do that after the meeting as well. In terms of this proposal that you'll see tonight in these several charts, the way I'd characterize it for you is that the business office team, working with the administration and our colleagues, have completed pretty thorough estimates on most budget categories and on the most significant dollar budget categories. So we're probably pretty close, absent any guidance or changes either from the board or senior administration. And by pretty close, I mean probably within a few percentage points either way, because we're still analyzing a few categories. We could end up having some minor revisions between now and when we return to the board for your review on January 10th, but I don't anticipate anything material. We are still waiting on some key input from the state, and that's very important as we look at these summary charts. For example, there's a factor called the Common Level of Appraisal, CLA, which is a factor that ultimately determines homestead tax rates. That CLA for the various municipalities and districts has not yet been released. Last year it was released, I think it was December 23rd. So there's a possibility that when we convene next time, I'll be able to offer a little bit more guidance if that's been released. The yield is, the property tax yield is another key factor. I won't get into the technicalities of the calculation, but I do want to highlight for you that the yield is a very powerful factor in driving what is typically the annual homestead tax rate. We have a yield that was published by the tax commissioner on December 1 in the annual letter, but please note as we talk about this that it is subject to change. Just because it was released and announced on December 1st doesn't mean that when the legislature convenes in January and February they can't change it. It could happen. In terms of equalized pupil and average daily membership, which are counts of student enrollment and which factors into cost per pupil, when I reviewed this same material last Tuesday with the Finance and Planning Committee, we did not yet have the first run from AOE of the equalized pupils for the year. So the number you're going to see in there was the last run from the previous year. We just received the first update on Sunday evening. I haven't changed the charts because I didn't want to change what the Finance Committee has reviewed, but I'll describe that for you. And again, I will caution you that that number can change because last year we received 6 updates from the AOE on equalized pupils. That said, as we'll end up concluding on the last page, I think because of the very significant change in yield that's been announced, it's probably fair to say, within an order of magnitude of, relative estimation, that in spite of the fact that the district's costs are expected to go up, I would not anticipate any significant increase in the tax rate. Again, I'm just making a very high-level estimate, but it looks like, based on some of the factors that we know to this time, that what you're going to see tonight will probably not drive any significant increase in the homestead tax rate based upon what we know today. Okay? Well, let me just launch into the first chart then with that context. And let me highlight a couple of labels here because it's really important. What we're looking at on page 2, first of all, is full-time employees. Okay, so the numbers on the bars that you're going to see are just the full-time employees. These number counts do not include approximately 60 to 80 part-time employees that the district has throughout the year, depending upon seasonal factors. But we're starting with the full-time. We'll add in the part-time later. Also, what the numbers that we're showing you here exclude positions that are funded by ESSER federal grants. Why are we doing that? Because we want the board and ultimately the community to see sort of the ongoing base operations that are funded by either local funds or ongoing and continuous federal grants like Title I, II, and IV. Whereas ESSER is come and it's going to go. So there are going to be some ins and some outs, and we'll look at those, but we want to show you first the overall trend, excluding those funded positions, which are a net neutral to the district. So if you look at the bar chart, you'll see over on the far left-hand side, the first bar shows you what the full-time employee count was for the FY21 budget at 522 full-time employees, and over at the far right, you see 483 for the proposed full-time 24 budget. So in between, you see a couple of other budget years in blue and a couple of actual snapshots of the full-time employees that were on the payroll that were paid in June of 2021 and December of this year. And there's some interesting trends there, as you can see. But the main point that I want to make on this chart is that the proposed budget that we're bringing before the board would have a full-time employee count, excluding ESSER, of 10 fewer full-time positions being funded in '24, as was the case in '23. So that's about a 2% reduction in the full-time employees, which is basically on trend with, the 1 to 2% reductions in student counts that we've seen recently. And more importantly is just a continuation of recent years' focus on seeing what we could do to align overall staffing with student enrollment. And of course, you can see that the staffing has come down between 2 and 3% per year over the last several years as the administration has focused very carefully on this. Why is that so important? Well, because 80% of the district's budget consists of salary and benefits for employees. And so the number of employees that you have is clearly going to be one of the most substantial drivers of the overall budget, as well as, of course, what you're paying those employees. And by taking down the number that we're going to utilize or propose to utilize in '24, that reduction in employees will help the district to substantially offset increasing salary and benefit costs per person. Salary escalations, for example, that have already been contracted per recent labor negotiations, and so, obviously are mandated. Let me stop there and ask if anybody has any questions about the trends on these charts. Okay, let's go on to page 3 then. So this page summarizes total salary and benefits. If you hear me use the word compensation, I'm not referring just to salaries. When I use the word compensation, I'm always referring to salary and benefits, because those are the compensation costs which must be borne by the taxpayer. Many employees would say, well, salaries, the cash that I take home, and that's true, and benefits typically are non-cash, but they do have a cost to the taxpayer, and they are very valuable to the employee. So we look at this all in. And as you'll see in the center, we've got a box for the fiscal '24 budget proposal. Right next to it, to the left, we have the approved '23 budget. And the couple of lines we want you to look at are first the salaries for both budgets, the benefits, and then the total compensation. Now, what's above the horizontal line, once again, is excluding ESSER-funded positions and ESSER costs. And if you look down to the lower panel below the line, that's where the ESSER metrics are captured, which will ultimately get added into the total budget. But I want to talk about those separately so that once again you can see the trends. So because of the anticipated reductions in employee counts and funded positions, in spite of the fact that salary increases per labor agreements are scheduled to increase 3 to 3.5% from '23 to '24. Right now, our expectation is that salary costs in total will be relatively flat. Now, that's a pretty significant result. And in addition to the reduction in employees, full-time positions, I also want to point out, some of you might recall, that in fiscal '22, so the year that ended this June 30, the district had 11% turnover in its full-time positions. We had 25 retirements, we had 29 resignations, and so we obviously replaced most of those positions, not all of them. Some of it gave us some flexibility to realign, but there are ins and outs. A person might have retired who was making $80,000. We may have hired for that position somebody coming in at 60 or perhaps 50. We don't hire all new, inexperienced employees, but a lot of times the people who are retiring are pretty much, in the 20-year plus category, and they're going to be at the higher end. So there's a little bit of mix effect going on in here too, because 11% turnover is very substantial. In the benefits cost line, I wanted you to know this includes the fact that medical benefits per person, the premiums are going up about 12% year to year. We were lucky in the '23 budget, that was only about a 5% average increase. But one thing that partially offsets that increase is the state in its negotiations on the benefits packages, and the state is the one that determines the design and the implementation. They have made another policy change. Last year, it affected the buyout compensation. This year, they are instructing that districts will deposit $200 less per licensed employee in health, retirement, and savings accounts. And that $200 less multiplied by the number of employees creates a significant savings for the district and, of course, for the state and the taxpayer. There's still a very substantial sum of money that gets deposited into those accounts every year for each person, but that's a partial offset. So as a result, our current expectation is compensation will be flat year to year. The page says 53, but that's well within our accuracy to predict, so that is essentially a flat number. And as far as the full-time employee count that I'm showing you here, that's a reduction of 10, but it would actually be more of a reduction, perhaps, well, I'm not going to guess at the number, but it would be more than a 10-position reduction if it weren't for the fact that in our special education services program, we have been trying to adopt strategies to address both the needs of the services that we have to provide, as well as the availability of employees in the markets. And our director of special education and equity and diversity and inclusion, Pam Reed, has been very creative in realigning how we provide some services which in the past have been paid out as contracted third-party services, and now we are going to be budgeting to hire some additional full-time employees to provide some of those services we believe more effectively and more cost-effectively in-house. So if it were not for those, this number would actually be going down more than 10. Let's see, and of course that number doesn't include the 60 to 80 part-time employees. Now let me just talk for a moment before I pause about this, the ESSER metrics below the line. So you might recall, but the 23 budget included $875,000 in compensation for 10 employees. Those employees were providing special services that the administration deemed were important for COVID recovery, and that Rob Bliss and others determined qualified for ESSER funding, and then they did. In '24, we're anticipating about a $500,000 increase to $1.4 million for 12 positions, once again utilizing the availability of this funding for essential services to bring our students along post-COVID. And you can probably see why it's important to break these metrics out separately, because given the mix of positions, the compensation that we're going to use ESSER funds for, federal funds which do not increase our tax rate, that's actually going to go up by about, that $500,000 represents a 60% increase, which is very different from the level trends that I showed you above. And even 2 employees is a 20% increase. So again, just to keep the base trends separate from the ESSER funding that will go up and down between now and the end of fiscal '24 separate, you have those numbers. Now, let me stop and ask if you have questions about some of the things that I've covered on this page.
Thank you. So I was in here for more than an hour today.
I think it was more than 3 hours, actually.
No, it was more than an hour, though. And I forgot to ask this question, and Rob, I'm kind of going early here. Are we going to be able to hire these 12 individuals ESSER-funded FY '24?
Yes.
Okay. How many do we have right now?
Most of them, I would say, if you look at the numbers that Ted has, those 10 are in the 2 gaps that we have are, we had posted or we had planned for an ESSER-funded accounting support, because when you add 17 million to your business office, you need a little bit extra accounting support. So we have to get on that. Another thing that isn't necessarily represented here in this chart is we did add 1 IT professional on the back of ESSER funds to support ongoing learning and changes that we get.
Okay.
So I'm pretty confident right now, if we keep everybody in place for what we have, we'll hire these people. I have to be honest, and we'll even seek, if we can make use of the grant funds, we'll hire more to support the kids, especially in catching up with learning, using interventionists, and also social emotional folks. We did just bring on a counselor. I think you might have been in a packet tonight. So we brought on a counselor that we had to refill. We had somebody at the middle school, decided that location wasn't for them, but we were just able to fill with a highly qualified person. I will tell you, the principals are working really hard at that, making sure and Ms. Agner and her staff at IT, making sure we're making full use of those funds as we can.
Thank you.
Now, you have 2 different scenarios with that, right? Typically, when we go hire for these ESSER-related positions, we're very clear in saying that the funding expires in September of '24. And so in some occasions, we will say we can't guarantee a position after that. In the case of the recovery accounting assistant, we may say, depending upon how things work out, that that's a position that we want to absorb into our local budget to increase the bench staffing. So you always have to consider, is there a fiscal cliff here? Because, as you know well, September '24 is coming quickly. Any other questions? Okay, let's go on to page 4 then. So now this begins to pull together the overall budget. And again, you'll see the '24 proposed budget is in the center of the page in that box. '23 is next door. That compensation line now, that does include ESSER, as you can see at the top, total expenses including ESSER funding, okay? And that's really important, because we're going to get to a total bottom line that, would appear on the ballot, and that will be, pending any further changes, $63.7 million. So you see the compensation we had there, it's up by about $500,000. That's essentially ESSER funding year to year. But that $48.6 million includes the 1.4 from the previous page of ESSER funding. I've just noted that on the side for reference. Program costs are typically direct instructional costs, excluding salaries and benefits. There are lots of little categories and some big categories that go into there. And I put the annotation, this is in progress because we're still going through these line by line, school by school, seeing if we can find any more efficiencies. What we're thinking right now, based on the current look, is this category is likely to be up about 3%, which relative to inflation is not too bad. But between now and January 10th, we're going to see if we can fine tune that. I do want to address at least 3 changes on this page, which are plus or minus 30 or 40%, minus or plus, and you'll see them in special ed, facilities and transportation, and utilities. Of course, we can talk about the other numbers on the page as you wish. Now, the special ed cost, it looks like the budget is going down, and the budget is going down by $500,000. That's a 31% decrease. But the key point here is this is not a reduction in the costs incurred by the district for special education services. In fact, this is primarily a reclassification of where the costs are reported and accounted for, because as I mentioned a few minutes ago, in the past, the district used about, well, I didn't mention the number, but it was about $300,000 of third-party professional services, which, because of the way we're supposed to do the accounting, showed up here. But looking forward to the '24 budget, if you say, well, I'm not going to pay it as a third-party service, instead I'm going to hire somebody to do that in-house, then the costs go out of this line and move into compensation above, and I think I had alluded to that earlier. So in fact, if you were to look at special ed costs, they're not going to be down that significantly. I mean, we're looking at potentially about $50,000 of savings and less expense for some summer programs, and a few other minor changes, but most of that's a reclassification. The facilities and transportation up 43%. So the biggest part of this increase is ESSER related. That $4 million includes very extensive projects that are going to significantly improve district facilities, thanks to federal dollars that our taxpayers have already sent to Washington and we're going to get back in the form of ESSER grants, to the tune of about $1.8 million. So if you look at that $4 million, 1.8 will be funded by ESSER. So the net will still be significant, of course. I mean, you're still looking at almost $3 million, 2.8, something like that. What's going on there? That's a significant increase, and part of that reason relates to the facilities condition assessments that have been done, and so there's at least $500,000 year to year in '24 that's now included, that'll be locally funded for things like roof repairs and replacements, for things like the parking lots resurfacing at the high school. That alone would be $300,000, plus another 50 to 55 for resealing cracks in other pavement. So we've got some significant projects that, given the service life of some of these facilities, probably need to be addressed that can't be qualified using ESSER funds, but in the estimation of our administration and specifically our facilities director, Glenn Scott, we've reached a point where if you don't start doing some of this maintenance, that it will ultimately cost the district more. So that's the main story there. I'm going to skip down to utilities because that's a 33% increase, or about $300,000. And that reflects a 50% increase in fuel oil prices year to year, about a 12% increase in electricity. Other utilities that we use are actually staying flat. The bid that we received on wood pellets was basically unchanged in terms of dollars per ton year to year. Solar staying the same. Bottled gas, propane is not going up by too much. But even with those expenditures staying flat, obviously it's it's fuel, oil, and electricity that are the main part of the utility component, and that's what's driving those costs. I might just note briefly in terms of IT, you see that's up about 6%, but of that $55,000 increase, 45 will be covered by ESSER. So, wherever we can use ESSER funding to help with some things that need to be done in the district, we are doing that. But that brings the bottom line, including those ESSER funds, to $63.7 million, with $3.3 million of ESSER funding. And so on average, in total, we would be up about $2 million or 3% budget to budget. It would be up about, I think about $1.5 million excluding ESSER, because we did have some ESSER funding in '23. So let me stop there and ask if people have questions.
So, we have solar panels like we didn't used to have. Are we seeing a reduction in our electricity costs because of that?
I have not seen when you subtract out the fact that the district pays approximately $200,000 a year toward basically it's what they call, it's an energy performance contract. Somebody else owns the solar panels.
Okay, right.
They're renting them to us. That somebody else is taking advantage of the solar tax credits that a nonprofit like the school district would not get. So as part of the financing arrangements that my predecessor worked out with JCI, they provide the infrastructure. We provide a quarterly payment of about $50,000. If we don't realize a certain level of electricity savings, then JCI will keep us whole, and it gets much more complicated from there. So this is an area that we're looking into, and as a matter of fact, as we work with our new public auditors on our current financial statements, we flag this as an area for them to look at and to give us their perspective. It's an area that we need to study further. I can't say that I've seen any material reduction in what we're spending on electricity either way. So I guess you could look at that as a good news or a bad news story. It's not costing us a lot more, but it's not yet saving us any noticeable amount of money. But we are going to have to sit down with the JCI engineers and with our own engineers to see if we can understand that a little bit better in the coming year.
Okay.
By the way, when this, one other question that I have asked the new auditor to think about is whether the district, and Charlene, you will probably appreciate this from an accounting standpoint, when this agreement is over, the way the agreement is written, the solar panels become owned by the school district.
Right.
Which in my opinion is not a very good deal. Because by the time the agreement is over in 20 years, those solar panels will be obsolete. And there will be a restoration expense to remove them. I don't want the solar panels. And so one of the things that I've asked the auditor to look at is, I know I'm going to have a liability in 20 years. I'm either going to let them sit and rust, or I'm going to remove them. So should I begin to accrue gradually, year by year, for the anticipated remediation cost? And so that's not in this budget, but I've asked them to give us guidance on that, because most other companies, like if you drill an oil well, you know that it's going to expire, you're going to have to cap it and plug it, and you start accruing for that along the way.
Right.
And, who knows how expensive that might be, so I'm going to work with our accountants and then JCI on that.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
And I tried to get your electric buses, but we didn't get the grant.
Okay.
Typically though, on the solar, wouldn't it be more of, you're not really gonna see any savings up front until it comes to a point where
Yes,
down the road,
Right.
the cost of what you've done is gonna
yes,
finally start recouping.
right. And then those
Down the road.
performance payments start to go back down,
Right.
and then that creates a little bit more
And I'm
room for
wondering
you.
how much of that savings is gonna be eaten into because we have to do that restoration at the end.
Yes.
What are we really?
That's one of my projects for the coming 6 months, is to take a look at that and
How
to
many
see.
years do we actually recoup that before it's obsolete, and then the cost of the obsolete versus the gain?
Yeah. Yeah, and it depends on how you define obsolete, because a lot of people would tell you that in 5 years they're obsolete. at least
Which-
not as efficient. Yep.
If we want to translate that to the electric buses, may not be a good idea for the longevity purposes also, because now they're showing that the batteries need attention, and they tend to cost a lot more.
Right. Oh, the only basis on which we were contemplating looking into electric buses is when the government decided to use $5 billion of our tax money to purchase electric buses for school districts across the country. So the thought was, if you wish to give us a $375,000 electric school bus without any outlay of money on our part, maybe we'll take it, because then our operating expenses would be lower. But as you point out, it's not without problems, and it's what you don't know that would concern me.
If it seems too good to be true, run.
Yeah, typically that's the case. But it's interesting because according to this is ironic, but according to the Fed's poverty metrics, Rutland City was not sufficiently poor, according to the metrics they were using, to qualify for the funding on this first round. I said, I'd like to see who got that funding, but at any rate, you're right about that. Buyer beware, be very cautious. Yeah. Any other questions about the line?
Just a point of
Yes.
clarification, I think also an important part of that agreement with the solar purchasing is we had work done in return that we didn't pay for, that is being paid for
I'm sure.
by this project.
I'm sure that's
So
right.
it's not, we're not just looking at a solar as a standalone investment.
Yes.
We invested in a lot of the energy controls updates, and how we paid for it was to.
That's probably right.
Solar deal.
Yes, because I know that JCI was doing work, in the mid-teens. I mean, 2015, 2017, they replaced the ballast in a lot of the lights, so that reduces our PCB exposure going forward. But until I can better understand the contract, and I've read a lot of contracts, but this one's really complicated, it's hard to say what's in and what's out. But knowing Peter Amons, who was involved in this, I am sure it's a very good deal. It's just that we need to understand it a little bit better, because Peter was very sharp, and he wouldn't do a bad deal for the district. Any other questions about the total expenses? Okay, let's take a look at a really important page 5. So this shows you what's going on. The expenses are one thing, but revenues are just as important, because revenues help offset those expenses and ultimately determine what the state of Vermont has to fund on our behalf. So you see several main areas of revenues: federal, tuition revenues, working capital, special ed, and local. So the federal grants, largely due to ESSER, are expected to go up by over $1 million next year. Another factor in there, fortunately, is that apparently our district is going to qualify for some larger allocations year to year in the Title I, II, and IV funding that we typically receive. So that's driving up some of this change as well, and that's a good thing. We have many students coming into the district from other towns and cities. We typically get about $2.5 million of revenue from those towns for the students that they send. We're assuming right now that that'll stay about flat. This is one of the areas that we're still going to be working between now and January 10th to see if we can justify taking credit for a little bit more revenue than what we've estimated so far. We're not planning on any working capital draws. We went to that party a few years ago, and that work is done. Special ed is an area that we're looking at very closely. We don't like the fact that the preliminary indication is that our revenues for special ed and local could be down by more than $1 million year to year. This is what I will call a conservative estimate for now. We're hopeful that maybe by the time we come back on January 10th, the drop might not be so significant, but what's going on here is implementation of Act 173, which the financial aspects of which were not supposed to be implemented until the weighting study was implemented, and the effects of one were intended to offset the effects of another. And unfortunately, they're moving ahead with the financial aspects of 173, whereas the weighting study financial provisions are not to be implemented until 25. And the state is moving to a model that is very different. What they're proposing to do is, and I guess it's part of the act, is in the past, the funding that the district and others would receive would be a reimbursement model. So if you spent $100 on qualifying special education services, the state said, okay, we'll reimburse you for 56%, or we'll send you back $56 for those qualifying expenses. And so to the extent that you could anticipate what those expenditures were going to be, it was pretty straightforward to come up with what you expected to get back. And because Rutland City Public Schools has long been a city that has had a constituency that has required a fair amount of special education services, our expenditures were relatively high, if you were to say expenditures on average per student, as compared to other communities that tend to be perhaps more affluent or have a different socioeconomic profile, which then perhaps spend less on these services than our community needs to. Well, unfortunately for Rutland City, the new model is to move all districts to a common dollar of reimbursement per student. And what the AOE is looking at right now is saying by 2027, we would like to be at a point where everybody is getting, and the number they have right now is approximately $2,100 of compensation per student. And I don't mean per special ed student, I mean per student in total in the school system. Right now, our district spends $2,800 per student. And so if we get moved down to, bless you, if we get moved down on a pro rata basis between now and 27, that's looking like very significant reductions from the reimbursement model to the one-size-fits-all model. I don't understand why the government is proposing a solution like this, other than the obvious motivation of trying to reduce what the state spends on special education. But it has a very perverse impact, and that's a strong word which I'm using intentionally, because there are some school systems in the state which are spending less than the average of $2,100 per student. There's some that might be spending $1,600, and they will actually get an increase in funding for special ed as they move from, say, $1,600 up to $2,100. So it's a reverse Robin Hood, but it's the law, and we're just going to have to make sure that we have the right numbers, and we'll figure out the solution as we always do. But when you take all of these revenues, which go up only marginally because our increased sourcing from federal basically offsets what we're currently anticipating, and again, I hope I have better news for you come January 10th, but what we're anticipating is a reduction in special ed funding from the state. Revenues are essentially flat, federal and local. And as you may recall, when you take $63.6 million in total expenses and you subtract out federal and local revenues of 25, that leaves you with a remaining net expenses of $38.6 million that somebody has to pay for, and that somebody are the state taxpayers of Vermont and the state education fund. So given the relative changes in revenues and expenses, right now we're anticipating that the net draw from the state would go up by about $2 million or 5%. And that is a key factor which ultimately drives tax rate. The good news is, because the yield is going to go up per the December 1st announcement, it went up by 18% this year. It's proposed to go up another 16% this coming year. It's likely to more than offset this impact on tax rates. And I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But let me ask you to flip to the next page, because page 6 summarizes what I've just told you. So you see the budget, you see the total expenses, you see on the next line the revenues, federal and local only, which then gives you the net of state to be funded. You know, when people talk about cost per pupil driving the tax rate, it's always important to remember it's not the total cost per pupil. The total cost per pupil would be the $63.6 million divided by the number of pupils. But all the state cares about for raising taxes, of course, is what they have to pay for. And that would be the net funding amount, the $38.6 million, divided by your number of pupils, which gives a cost per pupil on average. Now, the cost per pupil, the equalized pupils you see there, is in blue, because there are many numbers in blue that are very preliminary and that are going to change for sure. That number of 1958 was just updated Sunday evening to 1911. So that's a 2.5% decline versus the 0.6%. It will change again. If we plugged 9/11 in right now, instead of an average cost per pupil of $19,700, you'd get about $20,000, be a little bit more than $20,000, and it would be comparable to the Vermont state average. And so normally, an increase of, well, in this case, it would be more than 5.9%, would drive a comparable rate, increase in the tax rate. But that is very unlikely to happen this year, again, for the yield. And by the way, the state is well aware of these trends. The state's well aware that inflation is at rates that haven't been seen in 40 years. It's not affecting just us, it affects everybody. And many people who have not been perhaps as conscientious as being able to manage down their full-time staffing levels like we've been doing for several years, probably looking at more significant increase in compensation. That'll be a big driver of a lot of people's costs, and I have to believe that somebody in Montpelier figured out we better do something to utilize the $63 million surplus in the general education fund to provide some tax relief. And just to show you how powerful that is, page 7 will give you a bridge between the rate that we had here in Rutland City for homestead taxes, and again, I'm just looking at the rate, not the bill, of $1.64 as the fiscal 22 rate, and what was $1.57 for this current year of 23. And you know, when I've gone a couple of times over to speak with the Alder Board, which they've been kind enough to invite me a couple of times just to give them an update. Last time I was over there, I said, yeah, you know, the tax rate went down from $1.64 to $1.57, but let's not get very excited about that, because even though everybody welcomes a drop in rate, doesn't necessarily mean that your taxes go down, because the taxes are also a basis of your valuation. And just as importantly, if nothing else had happened from 22 to 23, other than our expenditures changed and our revenues changed, then the tax rate actually, forget about the yield, forget about the CLA, then the city's tax rate actually would have gone up by 10 cents. Because as you can see under the columns for expenditure and revenues, the higher expenditures had the effective input of rate, it would have, all other things being the same, would have raised the tax rate by 16 cents. Whereas the increase in revenues that we realized, which were ESSER related mainly for 23, that would have reduced the tax rate by 6 cents. That's a net of 10. So if nothing else had happened, our tax rate would have gone from $1.64 up to $1.74. But instead, because of the drop in yield, the tax rates were reduced by about 25 cents, as you can see. So another way to look at this is, if nothing had happened, if expenditure stayed the same, revenue stayed the same, CLA hadn't changed, then because of the change in yield, our tax rate would have gone down from $1.64 to $1.39. Wouldn't that have been great? But that wasn't the case, of course, because we had a few other factors. And finally, one other way you can think about this is, if you look at yield and CLA as factors determined by the state, because we really don't, you can see that on the one hand, we benefited by about 25 cents. On the other hand, the CLA raised our tax rate by about 8 cents, because in this given year, the CLA dropped from about about 93% to 88.6%. So a several percentage point drop. That had the effect of increasing the tax rate by 8 cents. So on net, that was a 17-cent decline, okay, net of those two factors. Why am I going through this math with you? Because what is the most powerful effect on this page? It's the yield. And the yield went up by 18% this year. It's going up by 16% for the coming year. So if all of these other factors stay the same, the CLA might decline a little bit, probably not that much. You know, our expenditures and revenues are in pretty good shape. This sets up a scenario where there's a very good chance, but I wouldn't bet my job on it because I don't have a crystal ball, but there's a very good chance that that powerful yield effect will mitigate other possible increases in tax rates. So the good news scenario would be, if that turns out to be the case, then at least the taxpayer going from 23 to 24 will not look at Rutland City at a significant increase in homestead tax rate. It might stay flat. Their tax bill could very well go up because the tax bill is the rate times the tax appraisal. And the tax commissioner of Vermont is expecting that on average, taxpayers are going to be looking at 3 to 4% increases in their tax bill. But this is the rate. So let me stop there and, just ask you if you have questions. But I think, if this scenario works out for the coming year, that would be good news, basically, but it still then creates a concern for what happens the next year if you don't have that yield effect. So we're trying to spend very carefully, we're trying to not overspend, and we're trying to keep our most important expenditure, what we spend on people, within good management parameters to deliver the education at reasonable cost, because there could be another financial cliff coming in '25, we just don't know. So you have to hope for the best and plan for the less best. Any questions about that? One last suggestion for you then, on page 8. People have talked about how are we going to fund the turf field, which if you ask different people, they'll tell you estimates range anywhere from $500,000 to $750,000. I'm a person who likes diversification for many reasons. And so if the board wants to consider, if the finance committee wants to consider, in rough terms, you could do something like, say, administration, please increase the budget by $250,000 and set that money aside like you do with the annual contingency fund to be ready to help fund a turf replacement in '25. And in addition to that, maybe we'll do some fundraising efforts that would come up with another couple of $100,000, and maybe there'll be another source of funding. But I just put it out there because if indeed the tax rate is going to be flat to down, and there's a good possibility of that, and given that my current modeling suggests that if you add $250,000 for the coming tax year, it would not significantly increase the rate, I don't know if now is the time to begin to set aside some money for that. That's something that the board would have to consider, given that Glenn Scott has advised that it's very likely that that turf field needs to be replaced in fiscal '25. It's within a year or two of its useful life. It's actually beyond that. So I just plant that as a seed for thought as we look at how these trends are going to go, and I really appreciate your patience and your attention to these details. I think overall, for '24, it's going to be a good story for our school district, and we've got a year to worry about '25.
Thank you for your optimism.
I am guilty of being a glasses half full kind of person, but at the same time, I would not advertise optimism if I didn't think it had a very good chance of becoming true, because as one of my best mentors always told me, he said, Plemenos, the estimate I want from you is, I want an estimate that is your best guess, meaning there's an equal chance that it'll come over as an equal chance it'll be under. Don't sandbox, just give me what you think, and that's what we've tried to do.
Positive.
There you go.
Ted, thanks for always making it digestible. And slowing down to really explain what each item means. I think that's really helpful. And second, or a question is, when would we need to make a decision if we did want to add 250 or some amount to?
Mid-January, or shortly after your board meeting on the 10th. And the reason for that is because the town clerk, Henry Heck, needs the ballot language and the 3 numbers by the 20th or the 25th of January. Last year I pressed him and he gave me until February 1, but he wasn't happy.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Ted. All right, next up we have the recovery update with Rob and Abby show. How far can your ESSER funds go?
Abby Brodowski, the recovery coordinator. Rob and I are here tonight to bring you an updated ARP ESSER plan and put out the survey for meaningful engagement. You've received that in your packet. I do have a bunch of paper copies, so raise your hand if you would like a paper copy. I'll send a few around. So just a little background and history. We have 3 rounds of ESSER funding. And this plan is specific to just the third round, which is ARP ESSER, sometimes called ESSER 3. This plan is a little bit unique in that anytime we make changes to it, unlike ESSER 1 or 2, we are required to go out to the community for meaningful engagement. So Buildings Committee may recall a little while ago, we were not able to use about $500,000 of ARP ESSER funding toward ADA accessibility, which was something we had hoped to be able to do. It was not an allowable use of the grant. So we reallocated that and kind of moved things around and made changes just based on how we anticipate the grant playing out over time. So when you're looking at the plan, I recommend paying very particular attention to pages 5 through 10. What you see here is what we are required to give the state, and that's confusing. So if you go to page 5, you'll start to see every item that we are planning on using funding for and the amount next to those items, what the plan is. In your board packet, you have this information digitally. There is a survey, and that survey will ask you, how do you feel about changes? And it lists all of the changes being made. The survey is due on Friday the 16th. That's this upcoming Friday at noon. And it can be found on the district's website. And so I want to make sure that people at home understand that you can go to the school district's website and click on the central office tab at the top. And at the very bottom is a little thing that says ESSER information. So this plan and the survey are open to everybody. And it's actually really important that we get a lot of different types of people and a lot of different constituent groups to respond to the changes. And the changes are listed right on the survey. There's actually links in the survey to the plan. I tried to make it as easy as possible for folks. And if anybody has questions between now and the end of the week, you're welcome to let Rob or I know. But really, as opposed to me teaching you about this whole plan, you can just look it over. You can let us know what thoughts you have. And that will actually help us as we move forward and make changes to the plan and hope to use the funding in an evolving way. Any questions? Peter?
Again, I talked to Abby today and very helpful, answered, I had a lot of questions. Most of them were grouped and between you and Ted, you answered them all. But just the one thing, she wanted to orient you to page 5, because if you look at page 3 and 4, it looks like it's the same as page 5 through 8 or 9. It is. Page 3 and 4 is just an index, if you will. Page 5 through the end explains everything. So they are the same thing, not double.
They're slightly
Yeah,
different.
there's a couple things added on page 5 through whatever.
Yeah, and the difference is just in that part right before pages 3 to 5, it's anything related to COVID specific, whereas the remainder of it allows us, it's some of these other places that we're able to spend some money. So it all is related to COVID recovery, but there are some places that it's like very much tied to it. So my recommendation, go to page 5. Sorry for the confusion. Yep. It's just how we have to put it out.
Yep. Thank you.
I just want to acknowledge how much work this plan has taken and continues to take. And you both have done an amazing, stellar job, and thank you.
Trying very hard, and it is a recovery team, construction team effort, the principals, the curriculum staff, like the teacher, like there's nobody that's not doing the work. And I think it's important to mention that, because I don't think the people, even oftentimes doing the real work, even realize how much they are. So yeah, it's a big one.
Definitely. Don't want to leave any money on the table. Peter.
Question I didn't ask earlier. If we have something that is funded in the plan and all of a sudden we find out it's not available, the contractor's not available, the product isn't available, we won't receive it by end of month September 2024, our drop dead date, how long is the community engagement piece to be able to then reallocate those funds? And what's the threshold to be able to, that requires us to actually go through a community engagement to be able to reallocate those funds?
So there's not a specific amount of time that we're required to take, and I'm getting faster. So this is actually quicker. We're getting better at it, but this time is quicker than it was the first time we did it, just because it's becoming more routine. And so I would anticipate a few more times that we're going to have to do this before the end. Okay. And you'll hear from me, and I'll say, here's another survey, please fill it out. The board is one constituency that we really need to hear from. Many others, and I reach out to a list of folks that I have. We send it to all the staff. Students have the option to weigh in. So it's not a particular, you don't have like a month and 30 days, which is nice because many of our other things do kind of have those timelines.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Can I just add two things? One, I received a note that said Friday is December 16th. That's on your paper, but maybe you said something else, so.
Oh, sorry.
Please do it that as 16th.
16th at noon.
And the other thing I want to say is the fact that Peter Fingon described how you should interpret this report is an indication of one of two things. Either Peter Fingon is a great student, or Abby Brodowski is a great teacher, or they could both be true. And in which case, I want you to understand, and I really appreciate what you said, and Bill and I and Ted, and we all agree that without Abby's position, we would not go forward at all, because you just can't take on an extra $17 million of business and not have somebody learn. And I've always said Abby's steep learning curve is good for all of us. And she is becoming so proficient at these things. She rattles off federal regulations and all kinds
Rob
of
gets
stuff.
a lot of texts.
I just play bad cop when you need
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Allison.
Thank you.
And if I may, just nothing that you have,
Good student.
nothing you have to answer, but just why your position is so important also. The federal government has a nasty habit of clawing back funds if they don't like the answer that they got 3-5 years after the fact. You can't prove how you spent the $350,050 on vans, and they're going to say you can't prove it, so we're taking that money back. And who then owes it? The taxpayers of the city of Rutland. So that's the other reason why your position is so vitally important, so thank you.
I do a lot of record keeping and keeping all of those things together, and they belong to the district in case that ever happens.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up, we have committee reports. First one, I'll turn it over to Kathy for the policy committee report.
In the policy committee, we discussed the 3 drafts of potential policies from Attorney Bill Mew surrounding the evaluation of the superintendent and also the confidentiality of the superintendent's file. And basically where we netted out is that the superintendent's contract supersedes any policy that we might have. So Rob is actually going to draft procedures that fall under administration's umbrella, and we will leave our policy as is, which is intentionally vague and non-specific. And there's a policy 4250 about the contract renewal, and that actually needs to be included in the superintendent's contract, so not in the policy. So all important notes for when the superintendent's contract is reevaluated. And that about sums up our policy committee meeting. Any questions?
Okay. So next up then, we'll turn it over to Kevin for the building committee report.
Okay, so we met on December 6th. We talked about, there's an easement for culvert work on Allen Street, near the Allen Street campus. And Glenn mentioned that the city will probably be coming back to us to ask for an easement to put a water line through from Southern Boulevard, which is a dead end, to Allen Street, which would go through, I forgot which direction. From the Allen Street building towards the stream is where this pipeline is going to go through. And we had a very extensive discussion about how that might have limitations on development, and this is a discussion that we're only beginning. So we'll be talking more about that in the future. We also talked about removing and replacing asbestos pipe insulation in the middle school. That will probably happen in February and March. The HVAC ongoing multi-phase process that we're doing with ESSER funds. There was a walkthrough for phase 1, which is the recommissioning, and bids for that will be due December 15th. For phase 2, which was the replacement of parts that need to be, that we know need to be replaced. There were 3 vendors that attended the walkthrough, but all of them said that they were not likely to bid, so we may need to break down those projects into smaller projects in order to get workable bids. And then we talked about the time frame for replacing the turf field and funding for that, and that too is a beginning and ongoing discussion that I'm sure will take on lots of different, well, it'll happen in lots of different places and different times, and we'll figure it out in the end. The little nugget that I'd like to take from that discussion was, I hadn't realized this, but the amount of money that you need to spend to maintain an actual grass field is more than what we've been spending on the turf field. So that's, I mean, this may be an expensive project, but it's less expensive than having real grass. So, I mean, that's a big thing. There's also Act 72, which is a facilities condition assessment that's required by the state, which fortunately we did something like this a couple of years ago. And so when we have to have this completed in November of '23, we're in a good position to, I mean, a lot of the work has been done recently, so we just need to update the report. So that will be less expensive than it would have otherwise been. So that's what we talked about in the building committee.
Any questions?
How'd I do, Glenn?
All right, thumbs up. Perfect. So next up then we have finance and strategic planning. So I will turn that over to Mary Beth. Thank you. Had her thunder taken away a little bit already with Bill's update and Ted's update.
I had a
but,
lot
you
of
know.
thunder taken away. I got nothing. No. The committee reviewed and for all intents and purposes probably endorsed the same budget proposal that we just all reviewed for a good amount of time. So thanks, Ted. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mary Beth. And then the superintendent evaluation committee report. Again, Mary Beth.
Thank you. I believe that a draft is in your hands. Kathy and I put together the numerical data, the subsection narrative data, into a narrative. Into a narrative, and then also created an executive summary of sorts, I guess we could call it that, with some suggestions, and we passed it off to you.
The board reviewed it.
Yes, I'm sorry,
we have to adopt it tonight, so we will do that later.
Yeah, okay, yeah, after the last board meeting, met for a bit, I think, to really chat about it, and and really dive in, so, yeah. Thanks for helping me with my update.
Hey,
thank you.
That's where we're at. Okay.
That's where we're at, yes.
That's where we're at. So next up we have unfinished business, and I was digging before to find the actual business that is unfinished for the motion. Okay, so this was our August motion, we approved the policy for non-discriminatory school branding, and the motion was to immediately retire the Raider mascot name, moniker, imaging, and any associated school branding, with a new mascot recommendation from administration to be brought before the board by January 2023. So that was a motion that the board adopted, and I guess what we are looking to have an update on.
Can I just ask a quick question before we get into discussion, maybe, about this? Sure. So I guess my question is, with the 11 of us sitting here, and even after we heard the discussion of how administration wasn't ready to discuss, but half of the board was still wanting an update and discussion on this matter. And so what I'm asking is if any of those who voted no wanted to volunteer why you would not extend that courtesy to the other side of the board who wanted to have a discussion and try and stop that process.
I
Is there
don't
a
think
reason for that?
that's not what we're here for.
We could
So our
understand why they're thinking
motion,
that way. Can we not talk about it, or?
so
why can't
we
talk about it?
we are going to talk about the motion and an update on the motion. We are not going to sit here and have people validate.
I'm just
and-
asking if
and-
you want to volunteer, but apparently it's
So
not, so I
can
find
we
it
just focus
disingenuous
on
that you would
what,
try and stop the process.
what is
and just
on
have
the
a
agenda?
discussion.
And what was on the agenda was for an update on the process. We're not here to pick apart people, call them out individually for their votes. That's not
fine.
our role.
Then
So
let's continue
we're
with
here
our
for
conversation.
the discussion on the topic that was requested to be put on the agenda. So, so that was the motion by the board. And so I guess looking for an update from my perspective, we had put it on the prior agenda, and then, because we make the agendas a couple weeks before the meeting, and then we learned about an hour before the meeting that there really was not a mascot proposal to come before the board. So we removed that from the meeting, and administration is working on that. So I think, do you want to update, Bill, as to where the process
Sure, yeah,
is
I
at?
can start, and maybe Greg can come up and, just fill in where I'm missing. So, for the board's information, Greg and the Student Senate went through a process where Greg pulled, I think if you remember, they asked for community to nominate different proposals for a name or moniker. They took that, they shrunk it down to the names that were most popular, and then went through a voting process with RHS and RMS. Am I right on that, Greg? Mm-hmm. And then came down to a conclusion for what the basically the kids and the faculty said they would like to have as a moniker. So that's as far as we've gotten. Our next step is then to say to the kids again, if you have an interest in representing this moniker in some way, this name in some way, representing it as a visual, what would it look like? And if we can go through that process again, then we think we will finish the process. So I don't know if I missed anything there. I would just try to shrink it down a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's the abridged version.
Karen?
So I just had a question. I mean, I thought we got emails about the names the top names that were selected, and I wasn't aware that we were going to have any artwork done or any mascot associated, especially with it, I believe it was Rutland was the top choice. What would be a mascot or a...
For Rutland?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, so I think Rutland as a name, as a moniker, was the top choice. And so we're going to throw that back to the students and say, how would you represent Rutland? What would that look like? I think there were a lot of good reasons for why students and adults nominated Rutland. They talked about their pride in community, pride in the work that this community does, the work that the school does, and that might have some kind of visual representation that could be something that we say, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's represent ourselves that way. It might be, Karen, that maybe this is as simple as just keeping that R that we have as a representation, or when I think about different mascots, NCAA mascots that are out there, some of them are simply, like Harvard Crimson. It's just a color, or it might be represented that way. But we want to ask the kids what they think and give them the chance to have that.
But just to kind of follow up, so we're going to have the kids do something for each of the top three?
No, they finished the process of coming down to a moniker, right? And so the moniker they selected was Rutland.
Okay, but doesn't the board have to approve that, or no?
We have
think
to approve a mascot.
Based on precedent, that is not how it has been, Allison. For the last several board meetings, the precedent has been voting on the name, not necessarily both. So, for the fact that it's out in the public, We haven't voted on it, so we're gonna bring it back to the students to have them go and pick something that the board hasn't voted, yes, that's what we, like, we are the ones who made the decision to have it go back to the administration. So, and for you to sit there and tell me that you didn't, you just told us that you didn't find out for an hour before the last meeting, that means an administration that I had a conversation with today lied to me because I was specifically asked, why was it off the agenda, why you took it off? I said, good question. From my understanding, which I found out the next day, Mr. Schillinger was ready to present to us the Rutland name. It's out in the public. So before the students, if you were gonna have them, so now we're doing double the work again. Precedent has been, we vote. It just keeps on, like, we're keeping the circus going time and time again. Let's vote on it, because at this point, they're not gonna do something that's going to be racist. Being part of what we should be, we should be voting on the name. If it's out there and the students are creating something, that's step one. And then step two would be whatever the final is. That's what was charged to them.
What I don't understand is we decided as a board to adopt the policy of the state of Vermont. That is our purview to decide whether or not this moniker is offensive. That's it. And
It's a multiple step process.
If administration is gonna come to us with a moniker, if it's not offensive, which I don't find personally Rutland to be offensive, then I think, I don't know why we have to vote. There is no vote here. It's not offensive. And why can't we just let administration take this now, drop this whole thing, they can handle it on their own and do a moniker or a picturesque thing on their time when the kids are ready to do it and inspired to do it versus telling them we need something done in a month. I don't think that's right either. I mean, can we just let this, I mean, there was a time where we were involved and that was then, but this is now. They can take it now. Let's just end the year, say Rutland's great, be done, let administration do it, and let them do whatever they want to do with it, move forward. And if it comes back, and if we find it to be offensive at that time, then we'll speak up. But I don't really feel like we need to vote on anything at this point. They presented it, let it be. It's not offensive, in my opinion. If you want to put our stamp on it and say, great, I think that's great, but maybe a vote, I don't understand at this point, really. I think let them
open-ended action item.
Let them do on their timeline what they want to do with the picture, the graphics, and let it come naturally and organically versus trying to make this whole process happen. For what purpose? Let's just, if you want to have families come here and businesses come here, let's just drop this whole mascot discussion. I'm just respectfully asking that maybe tonight we could just agree that Rutland is great and let the administration take it from here and bye-bye for that conversation.
Kevin?
I'm just asking.
Okay, my question is the wording of the motion that we approved. And did we ask for a new mascot?
Correct.
And so we haven't gotten a new mascot, to my understanding.
We didn't have a mascot. When the motion went forward, we only had a name. We had already retired the Raider name, or excuse me, the Raider logo, so we didn't have a mascot. We only had the word Raider.
We still have signs that say Home of the Raiders. We still have.
Find them. They've all, majority of, I believe they've all been replaced.
Can we not have the back and forth? And Kevin, you have the floor.
Yeah, my understanding is we asked for a new mascot. And I think, okay, historically, teams and names that haven't come up with a name eventually do come up with one later. I'm thinking about the Washington Football Club. That's, they're now the Commanders. Is that right?
Worst name ever.
I can't speak for whatever Mr. Snyder, nor would I want to.
I don't think you want to.
But yeah, I mean,
It's time to move on.
the problem with the Raiders was that there was a long history of racist connotations, and my feeling is that if we don't replace it with something, then people will continue calling us and calling our teams and calling themselves the Raiders, and I think that's a racist situation, and I don't think doing that really addresses the issue. That's my perspective. I think that's enough.
Peter, and then Mary Beth?
So I'm going to agree with Charlene. I'm not sure that we really need to do anything. I think we need to thank the, that's all right. I'm going to ask Bill here to correct me if I'm wrong. So we asked the students of our district to come up with what they wanted as a representation for themselves. And 44% roughly voted Rutland. And then 26% roughly voted Raptors. And then 23% roughly voted Ravens, and then I think it was, what is it? Go ahead.
In the third iteration of this, the second round, the final, when it was left to the final four, 43% selected Rutland, 26 Raptors, and then it was 15.8 Ravens, and then 14.9 Red Wolves.
Okay. So my point is this: we put our trust in our students to get this done, and they did. They came up with a process, a product. How many voted, roughly?
On that final round was 342. Before that was 240. Before that was.
And all the students had the opportunity to vote. Great. So I think we need to trust our students. You know, we need to show our students the same respect that we expect them to show us, and we need to trust them and get this done. We should adopt it, allow this name to go into force, and then ask them to come up with a picture, if you will. How is it going to be represented going forward? And then that will come back to us, and we'll do the same thing. So, thank you.
Just a point of clarification. That didn't only involve students, correct? The citizenry was invited to participate.
Correct. So there were, on this one, there were 3 rounds. So the first round was just an open-ended suggestion form. It was just a blank line. The largest vote, the one that was suggested the most frequently was Rutland, 34 times. The second most was suggested 12 times. So that was open to the public as well as to the school community. The second round was specific to students, as was the third.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. Well, one, Charlene, I just really thought it'd be more efficient. That's it. I thought that we weren't ready to talk about it tonight, and so that's why, just so you know. It was just about time efficiency. Let's not waste time tonight when we're going to talk about it in January. Okay, that was it. So I didn't have to answer that, but I thought you did deserve it. You know, that was it. That was my only thing. So I do believe the original motion said to retire the Raider name, which is what we did. Didn't say anything about a logo or mascot, but it said, hey, let's bring back a mascot, you know. And so you know, I don't want to go again. I always want to, you know, respect the kids, of course, and respect a process that's in place. I said it the last time we talked about this. I just think we owe the kids more, and we can do better than not having a mascot. I think I was quoted in the paper saying that over 1,000 NCAA institutions have figured this out, how to do this. So, so I just, you know, that's it. Yeah, that's all I got.
Kathy? I'd just like to point out that since Raiders was retired, that we are referred to as Rutland. It's on our uniforms, it's in the newspaper. If you go into Walgreens or CVS, where there used to be a Raider sweatshirt, there's now a Rutland sweatshirt. So I'm not sure there needs to be a vote because we have been Rutland, we are Rutland, that's how people are referring to us. And I'd like to be hopeful about this process and a mascot. But I don't, administration isn't ready. Thank you so much for all of what you've done to talk about what that visual might be. So I think what we're all
It's Karen and then Stephanie.
Well, I was just going to say, kind of along the lines of what Charlene was saying, I feel like some of the members of the board were well aware of why it was removed from the last agenda, while others were not. Had all of us known that that was what was going on, we may not have had to have this discussion tonight. But I feel like that's kind of been going on a lot, where some members of the board are aware of what's going on and others are not. And I just would appreciate that we all be on the same playing field and all know what's going on.
Stephanie?
I agree with Karen in that regard, because, I mean, like I said, that I had an administrator today, which leads me to believe that I was lied to about why it was not on the agenda. I mean, clarification would have been nice, and yes, we voted on it, but, I mean, my assumption was that they hadn't, finished their process, and then I found out the next day that, in fact, that wasn't true. Now, I am 100% okay with the students voting for Rutland, and it's kind of ironic. That's what we asked for, a compromise before we went into this round, and board members felt that students need to identify as something, so they are identifying as something Rutland, which is what we tried to get as a compromise to all this other stuff. But it's, whether we vote on it at this point or not, it's precedent has obviously clearly been a joke to this board for the last 3 years.
Charlene?
So I'd like to get a clarification on whether or not this is something that is overstepping our bounds as an oversight committee, whether this is actually requiring some sort of vote where we have to put this on the agenda again as an action item, or can we just agree that administration is going to go forward with what they need to do and with our blessing on Rutland, and then they will work on their
Our vote is the blessing.
The picture of what they want to do. I mean, can we agree that this is something that doesn't have to be put on as an action item on a further agenda?
So actually, a point of clarification on that is that the school board is responsible for the adoption of a mascot. So that has to come back before the board to be voted on.
So that's part of our policy, I guess. And I'm not
so
aware of
you're
that.
mixing up. So one policy is the non-discriminatory branding.
Yeah.
And then there was precedent set from the Vermont Supreme Court when South Burlington was taken to court, saying that when the board agreed on their new mascot and they were told that they couldn't be that, they were taken to court, and Vermont Supreme Court ruled that it is under the purview of the school board. And that is also the information we got from our attorney 2 years ago when it was handed over to the school board by administration 3 years ago. So, Tricia?
I think we can pretty much kind of keep it simple here without the whole having to feel like we have to do due process of the vote. We can look at each other and ask each other, is Rutland racist? It's that simple. That's exactly what this whole policy was put into place about, was whether or not it was deemed offensive. So I think it would be very interesting for people to, if you have a problem with the name Rutland, if you think it's racist or offensive, now's the time to speak up. But by all means, that's my zip code, so I'm going to go with Rutland being okay. And that's what the student population agreed on, for us to go above them and tell them that their vote doesn't matter. It's not in our place. It's out of our place. So to keep having this discussion, I think it's a lovely idea. Bill and Greg, you guys find an illustration talking with the students over time. Why are we putting a time crunch and pressure on this? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but school really is about learning and education and higher. I think that this has become such the focus is not where it needs to be. These two men have done what we have asked them to do, and now we're telling them, some people, that Rutland isn't good enough. What more do we want to ask of our staff members to do? They have talked to the student body. The student body has come up. Are we going to say, no, we know better than you? No, enough is enough. Time to shut this ship down.
Kevin?
I think that until, in the absence of a mascot, which it seems like that's where we're headed, I want to see what the how this is going to be visualized, how it's going to be presented to the public, what our image of Rutland is going to be. And when when you're ready to bring that back to us, I think we need to approve it. Or not approve it if it's not appropriate, but it doesn't sound like that's done yet. Am I right with that, Greg?
Correct. No, in terms of my thinking with the process and looking at the motion, it sort of parsed out, to immediately retire the name, the moniker, the imagery, and any associated branding. So my sense of that, my read with that was, first and foremost, we need to come up with what's the name. And if there's one thing I've learned in my years of working with young people, they will frequently come up with something that you never thought of. And this one, to me, is another example of that. This was not on my radar. So they came up with something that I had not thought of. They confirmed it, I think, sort of 3 times over. So that's where I feel like that part of the name process, I feel like we're through that part of it. Yes, I would like to go back to work on the imagery. I will tell you that the portrait of a graduate work, like sitting in those meetings and those conversations, this has very much been in the back of my mind in terms of, like, we're working on values, priorities, and I'm wondering, and I think that eventually results in an image. I'd like those to be complementary. I agree. I think the January timeline is going to be problematic because I have really appreciated being able to involve students. The process of voting and revoting and soliciting input, they've said really, really smart things. And I've really appreciated that. So in terms of that next step with the imagery, I'd like the opportunity to be able to do that again. I don't, I think it's quite possible. I know January is included in the motion. I think it's distinctly possible that I would be coming back and saying, I don't have a final image for you. I could come up with something. I could probably have it for you tomorrow. It would stink. But
Let's not do that.
Let's not do that. Yeah. I think my preference would be to again incorporate that student voice. They come up with great ideas, and what I envision is some kind of a process, as we've discussed, and maybe bring in a professional graphic artist to do some refining, bring in the work that's being done as a part of Portrait of a Graduate to come to conclusion in terms of the imagery. And again, I go back to that motion that sort of parsed that out. I feel like we've got the name and the moniker. I think that the branding and the imagery is not yet done.
I'd like to add one more thing. And one thing that could be considered is there's so many different ways to look at logos. I love logos personally. I helped establish my own. But you think about like the R, what could you do with the R? You could, as you're saying, with the Portrait of the Graduate, we're slowly learning what our ultimate vision is. So we wanted to do something within the R, like integrity, resilience, something. I mean, it's going to come when you're ready. You can't force a good idea because those are the terrible ideas. So why not take our time, have the children, maybe, have some kind of, when you have assemblies, have something where people have an opportunity to maybe submit some ideas. But like have an R and have people that have the graphic knowledge, the student population. How would you fill in that R? How do you see a Rutland, student being? We don't have to settle on one way. There's more than one way to look at it. You can have the Rutland with items within the R. You can make a illustration within the R of what it looks like. There's so much to be done, and to put a parameter on it like January, when I'm creative, and when I'm not creative, I'm not creative. And if somebody is pushing deadlines on me, I'm going to turn out something and it's going to be crap. Do you want to see crap on the children's uniforms and on the shirts? I mean, really, we're better than that. It's enough to leave these fellows to do the job.
Charlene, I think the discussion of the damage of the discussion of talking about the mascot, which frankly I feel like only happens here. We're the only ones who keep talking about it. That is a bigger damage than being without a mascot for a little bit. You know, who knows? It could be just a little while, but it would be nice to stop the conversation about this so everybody can move forward and let these guys do their thing, like Trish was saying. Karen?
I was going to say, I agree with the people who say that I would like to see what the image would be as well. My thought is that I would like to see it definitely before the end of this school year, so that by the beginning of the next school year, this can all die down and we can start fresh in the next school year as to how they're going to be known, and we're not going to have students be confused as to what they are, who they are, what they represent. So that's my only suggestion on the timeline.
Stephanie?
I'd like to put a motion on the floor that we adopt Rutland and that we rescind the January 23rd date that the administration has to come back to us, and we give them through the end of the school year to come up with a logo to go with Rutland.
Second.
Can I ask a question to Greg? Is that enough time for you, you think, by the end of the school year? Is that reasonable for you guys?
Or if not the end of the school year, give us an update at that point when you think you can have a new logo.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, I think, yes, I think. I want to sort of leave open the possibility of me coming back because they keep coming up with ideas that I hadn't thought about. Like I said, I'd also like the ability to maybe incorporate some of that portrait of a graduate work. So yes, I think that's certainly reasonable to try to come up with imagery before that time, with the understanding that it's going to be a dialogue. You know, I'm happy to come back to the board and say, here's where we are, here's the progress that's been made. It's going faster, it's going slower, but I'd be happy to have that conversation throughout.
I wanted to say that I very much appreciate the work that's gone into this. And I'm listening to what's being said, and I think what we mentioned earlier in discussions about this was we were really saying we wanted to go to the kids, we wanted to hear what the kids had to say, we wanted to go with the kids' creativity. We talked a lot about how much we appreciate our kids and how smart they are, and you were saying the same thing. And what I'm hearing from you is that they're giving great input and we're getting a lot of information from them, and you're loving the things that they're coming up with. And when I look at the overall and I hear what you're saying, my thought is it's going great, and that's what we were hoping for. So let's just let it do that and see what comes out of it and see what imagery comes out of it. And we're not in a rush. And we can change the timeline. I feel like we could change the timeline of, like, present it when you're ready, and then we get a nice product. And yeah, let's go with that. That's cool. So we're not in a rush, and I don't feel like we should rush kids' creativity. And I feel like we don't have to be in a rush to put a stamp on this. When we wanted to change it in the first place, and we were trying to, make the correct decision to not have a racist moniker, we slowed down so that everybody could get involved and everybody could say their piece and everybody could understand the situation. So I think now that we're trying to adopt a new moniker and something that's inclusive, I think we can also slow down and say, get all the input, get all the information, and get a good product. So I don't see a reason to rush it. It sounds like the process is going well, and it sounds like the kids are involved. So I think we can continue. We can put this on the agenda again at some point, and it doesn't have to be a long, complicated discussion.
There's a motion on the floor.
Yes.
So I just Greg, so we retired Raider, right? And we're moving forward with a new mascot. And so I've been through 2 mascot changes, and I know they're extremely complicated and not always fun, right? And I know that's the understatement, probably of the century, right? So, mine were not as controversial, you know, so, but not without some controversy. So I think, so is the mascot going to have and I don't mean like a name like Buddy, like, I mean like a name like, or like Baxter the Bearcat, or, you know, but like, what are they working on? You know, or is that still happening? You know, I think that's where I'm confused. I think I'm confused, you know, in terms of what's actually happening. So if Rutland came forward initially from the surveys, right? Like, and so do you feel compelled then to put it to the students to include it, right? Okay, so then what are they working on? Like, okay, what are they working on? Let me just stop talking in circles.
So
and then I have another statement after that, yeah.
I too sort of struggled with that, and
Yeah.
I, you know, like a mascot, a moniker, imagery, logo, and I was even an English teacher, and all of the vocabulary, I think, becomes sort of this just of like, oh my goodness, what is all of that? So I think that the first thing is that the name, what I'm hearing loud and clear from students is they want it to be Rutland, just Rutland. Just leave it at that, just Rutland. So I think what they're working on, in answer to your question, is the associated imagery that we would use throughout branding. You know, I mean, where, in practice, where would that appear? I think, frankly, our practice for quite a while now, you know, we've had discussions about school uniforms. Our not school uniforms, our team uniforms. Sorry, different
We're going to uniforms, what?
It's going to be in the paper tomorrow.
Oh my God, Rutland moves to uniforms.
You rewind.
Sideways.
Yeah, so no, not school uniform, but the team uniform, we're just using Rutland. So I think we would continue to do so. The block R, which is on the center of the turf field, which is in the lobby of the high school building. We have a flag that has its own Twitter page with a block R, with thanks to Rutgers University. You know, like, so that's the name. There's an existing image and those I think can all kind of continue. I think the question becomes what other image is associated with that, and that, you know, has the potential eventually to, like, I think we're going to continue to use what we're using. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I don't think we have to do away with this in order to do that. I think what we're asking students to do is to come up with imagery that would be representative now. And again, it gets into those sort of like English teachery kinds of questions, like what is something that is representative, you know, like branding, you know, those kinds of discussions. So, you know, it has the potential to include geographic features. It has the potential to include architectural features, you know, things that someone would look at and it would be representative of the school community in that regard. But in terms of the name, the word, students have expressed this is the word that we want. And the block R, I mean, that predates the adoption of a map like that. You know, I actually did the research and I found in our archive room some of our oldest documents, and they have that block R. You know, that's been there for more than a century, so I think it would continue.
So, yeah, I think we initially chose this timeline, you know, because some people on the board were upset that we were retiring Raider right away, and then they would be without nothing. And so, you know, and so now it seems everybody wants to give more time, which is
I disagree. That's what my motion just said, give them to the end of the school year or
No, so I'm saying, yeah, I know, so.
Oh my God, we're going around and around about.
No, so anyway, so the timeline, so given what you're describing, yeah, time is a precious commodity, right? So I think, having that, we want it to be good, so the other thing I was going to mention, which is probably neither here nor there, is because you're not looking to put it on uniforms, right? So when I did a change of mascots at Green Mountain College, I think I've mentioned this before, maybe just in maybe policy or something, but the Keys 2 made our logo for us for free. So, because they knew they would benefit, from the redoing of our uniforms. So, and came up with a pretty nice eagle for Green Mountain College that is no longer in existence, of course, but yeah, anyway, that's all I want to say, yeah.
Kevin?
About the motion, the only thing that raises my concern is that you started off by saying, we adopt Rutland. We're already Rutland. We don't really have to do that part. How about if the motion says something like, we allow the students to complete their process and report back to us before the end of the school year? Does that work?
I thought we had to vote. I thought we had to adopt a moniker.
We have to adopt a mascot.
A mascot. So
we do not have to adopt a
So
moniker.
is Rutland what we're talking about here? Or
That is what Stephanie proposed, and that's what Kevin is asking. That is the motion that's on the floor that's being discussed.
It's my understanding that we have to accept it.
We have to accept it at
We
some
don't
point.
have to accept it now.
So what's the point of, this is why I'm frustrated. For the students to go forward to pick something, part of our job, our duty is to say, yes, they can go with Rutland. What is the point of having them go through and do whatever work they're gonna do, whether it takes them a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year, to have it finish and us to come back to this board, which by then, if it's 6 months, will be a whole new board, and say, never mind, we don't like that, we think it's racist. So part one is us agreeing, yes, we're good with Rutland, continue the process of becoming.
We're endorsing these men in their work, is what you're saying.
More Greg so we're saying yes to Rutland, so then they can move on to the second step. It's not a one-step process, it's a multi-step process. That's what I'm trying to say, like, it's a multi-step process, and they should not be doing step 2 without us, and as you said, we're the ones who have to adopt it, without us agreeing to step 1. Because if they go back to step 2, then we could be, God help us, back to the drawing board again. I'm just trying to move this process on so we can be hopefully done with it.
Kevin?
So if I would.
But I don't know that we need to approve Rutland because we're already Rutland.
The only reason we're Rutland is because we are no longer, because we dropped the Raiders and we dropped the Ravens, so they don't know what to call us, so they're using Rutland. That's why it's being called Rutland. Has not, because what else are the newspapers gonna call us?
It's neither here nor there. If we're already Rutland, can we just vote and say we are Rutland then?
Exactly. Hello, that's what I'm trying to say. I don't care, I'm
If we
done.
already are Rutland, then I guess I'm asking for formality to say, yes, we're Rutland. and
Exactly,
move
the formality to move forward, so the students can.
forward. The imagery, and they're gonna work on the imagery when they get to it.
I'm gonna walk out.
I think for this crew, we do need to.
Tricia, Courtney has the floor.
What do we need to do? For the policy, to meet the policy, we just have to vote on a mascot, correct? But when we don't have a mascot yet, correct? So do we need to do anything tonight? So can we just be done talking about this until we have a mascot presented to us that we vote on whether or
Do you
not
need to vote one way or the other?
Because all we have
There's
to
still a
do.
motion on the floor.
Right.
There's still a motion on the floor.
So technically, no, we do not have to vote on anything tonight. Stephanie has a motion on the floor to vote as an action item that we'd have to discuss further because it conflicts with an existing motion. And we also need 2/3 to pass as a non-warned agenda item. So that is the motion that we have on the floor, and I think I probably need you to restate it, Stephanie, because it said to adopt Rutland. I did not write it down. And you said end of the school year.
Would you like me to restate it?
Yes.
I would like to put a motion out on the floor to officially adopt Rutland as our name, as our name, and to give the student body through the end of the school year, or if need be longer, to come up with something, a logo, imagery, moniker, whichever word you want to use. And if they cannot do it by the end of the school year, then to have a status report to say, you know, if we're getting close, not close, what not. And so then that would also, then we would have to rescind the January 23rd that of the motion from, what was it, 2 months ago? August.
So that is the motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Mary Beth?
So, Stephanie, I thought you said initially in your motion something about rescinding.
Rescinding the January 23rd
That's not what you
date.
just restated, though.
Yes, you did.
Oh, you
Yes, I
did?
did.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I did.
I'm sorry. Okay. Because the motion from January, the motion from August did ask the administration to come up with a mascot.
Right, and that's where we would be in conflict, so.
Yeah.
But it's a multi-step process.
It seems like there's something else going on here, because to me, it's like either you want to Rutland to go forward or you don't.
Exactly.
If you don't, I'm not
Can
understanding
I-
what the holdup
Call
is.
the
Can I
question.
finish?
Yeah.
No.
Second.
I had my hand up as we were doing that. So, I mean, yeah, no, I mean, surely there's nothing hiding here. I'm not, I am just, I'm not sure how I feel. Like, because I wanted the kids to have something other than Rutland.
But they will.
That's exactly it. You wanted it something else besides Rutland, so you're
No.
going to continue this crap. Why don't we just
Step-
agree to agree?
Stop. Mary Beth has the floor.
Stephanie, please don't assume to know me. Please don't do that.
You just said it with your own
Stop.
words.
I love Rutland. It's a great name, clearly, right? It's awesome. It's why we're here. We all love this place. Why would we spend all this time doing this? We would love it. I spent 30 years in the industry of sport. 30 years. And I just said I was conflicted. I agree with you, Peter. Like, I want to listen to the kids. I do. So I'm just being honest and saying there's nothing going on here. It's just an inner conflict I'm having. I don't know how to go forward. I'm just being honest. Like, in that I want to listen to the kids, but I also think, gosh, wouldn't it be great for them to be like the Red Wolves or something and really do what kids do, which is like embrace a mascot and I don't know. You know, I'm just conflicted. There's nothing shady going on here. I'm just conflicted about the kids. Right?
If I may, the policy and the motion part of that, that's not for me to speak to. To your point, I would share with the board, you know, one conversation that I had, and I'm going to start that with the disclaimer. This is one conversation, right? So surveys are my best effort to get a collective sense of people, and then, you know, I try to spend as much time as I can actually talking with and in the presence of young people. And I can share a conversation that I had that I think captures some of how many students are feeling. And it was with a student, with a group of students, and, you know, it was after this had gone out, you know, I shared, you know, I said, you know, these are your survey results. You deserve to know what the answer is. So I had shared that. And I was speaking with a group of students, and there was I would describe it as a palpable sense of relief. And in the conversation with the students, what I kept hearing, 3 words that they just, each student separately and then actually collectively, they said, "We are Rutland." So again, there's this whole, like, there's this image, there's this metaphor, there's this, you know, Robbie the Rutland whatever, you know, like, there's this thing that's out here that is fake. And what these students were describing was, we are Rutland. You know, we're, you know, I went back to my office and I wrote it down. The young people of Rutland are the future of the community. So we are the future of the community. We're Rutland. And not me, Greg Schillinger, we, the young people of the student body, we want to honor and respect our community. And they talked about the need to do that right now. That this was, this is different. This is not like everybody else. And I like that. We are Rutland. We want to celebrate our community. That's just who we are. And we're going to be different than everybody else. Good, they say.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry, that just, really spoke to me.
That's helpful, Greg. That's helpful.
So the question had been called and seconded, so debate has ended.
Of course it has.
The question was called and seconded, so.
We've had debate this whole entire time, and now it's okay.
It's how the rules work. When a question is
When
called
you
and
decide,
seconded.
Okay.
It's Robert's Rules of Order. It's not when I decide. I don't make up.
I guess at this time, yes.
I mean, you could ask.
Charlene.
Karen
Yes,
called the
calling or-
question. Peter
Okay.
seconded calling the question. I had absolutely nothing to do with it. I'm following Robert's Rules of Order as I am supposed to in my role. You can internalize that, take it personally if you want, but this is Robert's Rules of Order. So the motion on the floor is to adopt Rutland as a name and give the student body till the end of the school year or later to develop a moniker, mascot, image, and come back to us with status reports. And
I would just like to ask for a friendly amendment, that it be, if it's not completed before the end of the school year, that we have an update before the end of the school year.
That was part of my motion.
think we
Okay,
said
I just
that a
wanted
couple.
to clarify, okay.
well, that was the status.
Thank you, though,
update.
for
Yeah, the status
clearing it up
update.
again and again.
Bill wants to say something.
Say the same thing, I think. Are you saying adopt Rutland as a moniker and then go forward?
Yes, she said as a name, and to come back with a moniker, mascot, image.
The moniker is a name, is the name.
An illustration, a representation of what the Rutland embraces. I mean, damn it, with all the narrative that the semantics, I'm so over this. I am so over this.
Question has been
So
called.
over it.
So that was a motion that was on the floor. And it was not warned on the agenda, so we need a 2/3 vote. So all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Roll call?
Yeah, I think we're gonna need a roll call.
Okay.
All right.
Got something.
I have one. Thank you, Betty. Sarah?
No.
Karen?
Yes.
Courtney?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Evan?
No.
Mary Beth?
Staying.
Tricia?
Yes.
Charlene?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Me, no. So we have 3 noes and 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses.
So the motion carries.
Finally move on.
Okay, so next up on the agenda is the,
Bill?
Can I
New
just
business-
ask for
yeah.
some clarification on that, because I'm not exactly sure what we're being tasked to do right now. He did that work, and they came up with the moniker of Rutland. So, are we coming back
Yes.
when at the end of the year with some kind of visual imagery, which we call a mascot? That's what we're doing.
Yep.
So the moniker is Rutland.
Rutland, right.
Go to Walmart, buy your shirt, okay?
I have a question. Did you say it had to pass with 2/3 though?
yes. So you're right.
That's
That's
not
not
2/3 of
2/3.
11.
I have a question on that.
Jesus.
Right.
7.333 is
So, yeah, we
2/3
need
of 11.
7 in favor,
Question.
so motion fails.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Question.
5,
Thank you for the
6.
clarification.
People abstaining, it seems like people are abstaining without a valid reason for abstaining. And so I think this is becoming like a precedent that if I don't want to give an opinion on something, I just abstain. Don't they have to state the basis of why they're abstaining?
So technically, yes, but you can't force anyone to vote.
Right,
You
but
can't force someone to
But
vote.
you asked Kevin Kiefaber why he was abstaining before.
Okay, so Mary Beth, if you could, report your attention, sorry, thank you, Karen.
I think I would just like to understand it better. And I don't feel, gosh, Tricia, don't laugh, like that's just.
No, it's just unbelievable. He
Okay, Tricia,
explained
stop,
to you.
stop.
Gosh, you're just being mean, like, you just.
This is not what we're here for.
So I didn't feel comfortable voting yet, that's it, I just needed more time. I need to understand it better, that's it.
All right.
Maybe I'm just not smart enough.
So we had the motion on the floor, the clarifying point of order, that it needed to pass by 2/3, so the motion did not, so the motion fails. So we are on to the next agenda item, which is the Stafford Technical Center budget ratification. So Melissa and Ted. And Kate.
Thank you, Greg.
Point of clarification, will we discuss this again in January?
That motion still exists, so yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's try again in
Thanks, Greg.
January.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Just an update. We presented our budget to you at the November meeting. Since then, our Regional Advisory Board did meet on December 7th, and they unanimously supported the budget that we presented to you. So in your packet, we did prepare 2 motions, if you would consider those. One is for the approval of the budget as presented in November, which would announce a tuition rate of $19,960. And the second is to accept our Perkins funds in an estimated amount of $403,118. We won't know that exact amount until April.
So I would entertain a motion, the first motion. You got it?
No, go,
Okay.
so moved.
So,
Second.
you're going to read it, Karen?
Yes.
Perfect.
I would move to accept the fiscal year 24 Stafford Technical Center budget as presented with total expenditures of $6,623. I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses. You need to make it bigger.
$6,625,516.
Thank you.
Any sense in that?
Resulting in a total tuition of $19,960.
That's right. Second?
Second.
Okay. Peter?
So Ted, if I may, was that dollar amount for our students that attend Stafford built into our budget? Thank you. I'm good.
Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And then I would entertain a motion, the second motion there, on the Perkins grant. Kevin?
I have my glasses.
She got hers now.
Too fair now.
I would like to move to accept the federal Carl D. Perkins grant for fiscal year '24 for use in support of the operation of Stafford Technical Center with an anticipated award amount of $403,118.
Second.
Okay. And any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Allison, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, we moved beyond the unfinished business. Is it too late to make a motion on that? A motion?
So,
To just maybe extend the timeline, that's all.
I was gonna,
Yeah, so,
I think
sorry, I just
that-
kinda got caught up in
That-
the.
That's
ship
done,
has
so that
sailed.
will happen in January,
So we
because that
can-
is the motion that stands.
Okay.
Is for them to come back to us in January. If
Yeah.
January they're not ready, they just need to come back and simply ask for an extension.
Okay, okay.
so which, just for clarification, my motion basically just takes what you just said. So what you guys all saying no, now
Okay,
they have
let's-
to come back to
this
us in
debate's over.
January.
This topic's over.
Can we have a short recess before executive session?
Certainly, 5-minute recess prior to executive session.
I do have
so
one more
we
thing
need
in new
to-
business.
Okay, Peter.
It's regarding a fundraiser.
All
So,
right, Stephanie and Kevin.
so I know a fundraiser that, and I haven't talked to this person,
You should have escaped.
so I'm working very hard not to identify who this person might be.
The same way another time.
Should we approach this person regarding funding the new turf field? Now, this person may charge a percentage of funds raised, as most professional fundraisers do, But if we were to raise $50,000 and this person were to charge us 10%, $5,000, that's $45,000 more than we would have without, and wouldn't have to tap the taxpayers for those funds. So what I could do is I could go to the finance meeting, I could go to the turf meeting. What is your suggestion?
So I think that probably it's a great idea, and we should refer it either, I'd probably start with the finance committee, and then from there it could get referred to buildings and
And I have not
grounds.
talked to this person
So-
because I didn't feel it was yet my place prior to discussing it here. And I know I'm being very vague, but I don't want,
Okay, so essentially motion on the floor, if, to restate, is to find out more information regarding fundraising sources.
Right, to
bring back
discuss with a
finance.
fundraiser, and yes.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? And I should have said, and to bring it back to the finance committee.
You're good.
Okay, so next on the agenda is executive session. So I would entertain a motion. First of all, we're going to have a 5-minute recess, and then entertain a motion to go into executive session for evaluation of an employee.
So moved.
And invite Superintendent Olson with us.
What did you find?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.